John Miller had lived all his 32 years in the wide, open spaces of Montana. His life was a rhythm of sunrises and sunsets, chores and quiet evenings by the fireplace. The Miller Ranch had been in his family for generations, a sprawling expanse of fields, pastures, and forests. Growing up, John had always been the shy, thoughtful boy who preferred the company of animals and the gentle hum of nature to the chatter of people. He had learned early that life on a ranch was not about excitement or adventure. It was about responsibility, hard work, and respect for the land. From a young age, John's days had been filled with tasks that most people in town never thought about. He woke before dawn to feed the cattle, repair fences, and check on the irrigation systems. His mornings were spent walking the pastures, listening to the soft lowing of cows, the rustle of the wind through the grass, and the occasional distant call of a hawk. The air was crisp, sometimes carrying the scent of fresh soil and wildflowers, sometimes tinged with the musky smell of hay and livestock. These scents, these sounds, were as familiar to John as the back of his own hand. School had been a quiet time for him. Unlike other boys, he had never been interested in sports or pranks. He preferred to sit under a tree with a book in his hands, or sketch the horses and cows he watched so carefully. He was not unfriendly. He simply did not feel the need to seek attention or approval from others. When it came to girls, John was even more reserved. He had always been shy, awkward in conversations, and unsure of how to express himself. Over time, he realized that it was easier to focus on the ranch and his daily routines than to navigate the complicated world of relationships. By the time he reached adulthood, John had grown into a strong, capable man. His hands were calloused from years of labor, his skin tanned by the sun, and his shoulders broad from carrying hay bales and working with cattle. His neighbors admired his work ethic and his quiet reliability. People in town knew him as polite, trustworthy, and dependable. Yet there was something missing in John's life, something he did not fully recognize until later: companionship. He had friends in town, casual acquaintances, and family members who cared about him, but he had never experienced the kind of connection that went beyond everyday conversation. John's days were structured, almost predictably so. He would rise before sunrise, dress in his worn jeans and flannel shirts, and step into the cold morning air. The roosters crowed as he made his way to the barn, the horses stirring as he approached. He would check each animal, ensuring they were healthy, fed, and safe. Any broken fence, a stuck gate, or sick livestock required immediate attention. There was no room for procrastination in his world. By mid-morning, he would repair fences, tend to the fields, and sometimes make a trip into town for supplies. Each evening, he would return to the ranch, tired but satisfied that he had fulfilled his responsibilities. Despite the routine, John never felt bored. There was a deep sense of purpose in the work he did. He understood the rhythms of nature, the needs of his animals, and the delicate balance required to maintain the land. The ranch was his life, and he treated it with the same care that a parent gives a child. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the sun dipped behind the distant mountains and the world turned gold and orange, a part of John longed for something more. He could not name it, but it was a yearning he felt deep in his chest. It was not loneliness in the sense of sadness, it was more of a longing for connection, for understanding, for someone who might see him as more than just a rancher. One crisp autumn afternoon, while John was fixing a fence near the creek that cut across the eastern edge of his property, he noticed a figure approaching from the winding dirt road. At first, he thought it was a delivery driver or perhaps a neighbor, which was unusual but not alarming. As the figure drew closer, John saw a woman walking confidently, her steps steady despite the uneven ground. She had a presence that was both commanding and warm, a mix of determination and ease. John felt a strange flutter in his chest, a feeling he had never experienced before when encountering someone. The woman introduced herself as Rachel. She explained that she was looking for temporary work and had heard about the Miller Ranch. She had experience with farm and ranch work, though she admitted she had mostly worked on smaller properties near the city. John, usually reserved and cautious, found himself intrigued. There was something in her eyes that seemed to look past the rugged exterior of his life and see the man underneath the quiet, thoughtful, responsible man who had spent his life tending to animals and land. Rachel's presence began to shift the rhythm of John's life. At first, her tasks were simple: feeding the chickens, mending fences, and helping with the barn chores. She worked with efficiency and care, often asking questions about the animals and the property, showing genuine interest in his work. John was impressed. He had rarely met someone who approached ranch life with such curiosity and respect. Her laughter, light and infectious, echoed across the fields in a way that seemed almost magical to John. It was a sound he had not realized he had been missing. Days turned into weeks, and Rachel became a regular part of the ranch. She would rise early, help with the morning chores, and then share small moments with John, a cup of coffee on the porch, conversation about the changing seasons, and stories about life in the city. She asked questions about his childhood, about the ranch's history, and about his dreams. Gently nudging him to open up, John found himself sharing things he had never told anyone else. Memories of his parents, his first experiences on the ranch, and the quiet moments when he had felt both joy and longing. It was in these moments that John began to realize the depth of his own solitude and the rarity of genuine connection. Rachel was not just a helper or a visitor. She was someone who seemed to understand him without judgment. She challenged him to see beyond his routines, to imagine life in colors he had forgotten existed. The days became brighter, the tasks lighter, and the ranch itself seemed more alive. John began to anticipate Rachel's questions, her laughter, and the thoughtful way she approached life. As autumn deepened into early winter, the nights grew longer and colder. The two of them would sometimes sit by the fireplace after dinner, talking about everything from the weather to their personal stories. John began to notice small changes in himself. He smiled more, laughed more freely, and felt a warmth in his chest that was unfamiliar but welcome. He realized that Rachel's presence was offering him something more than companionship. She was offering him the possibility of understanding, trust, and the gentle unraveling of a heart long hidden behind routine and shyness. Though John remained cautious, he could not deny the growing bond between them. There was no rush, no pressure. Only the slow unfolding of two lives meeting at the right moment. John began to wonder how he had lived all these years without this kind of connection, without someone who truly saw him. He knew that life on the ranch would continue to demand his attention, but he also understood that there was room for something more, a human connection that could bring joy, comfort, and the courage to embrace life beyond the fields and fences he had always known. By the time the first snow dusted the pasture, John had changed in ways he could hardly explain. His routine remained, but it was enriched by laughter, shared stories, and the quiet presence of someone who had chosen to step into his world and see him as he truly was. He was no longer just a solitary rancher. He was a man beginning to understand the power of trust, companionship, and the small, profound joys of opening one's heart to another person. As the days passed, John found himself looking forward to Rachel's presence more than he expected. She had settled into the rhythm of the ranch effortlessly, yet she always brought a spark of curiosity and energy that made even the hardest days feel lighter. Mornings, once filled with silence and routine, were now punctuated by her cheerful greetings and the sound of her boots crunching across the frosted ground. Even the animals seemed to respond to her energy. The horses would nuzzle her hand as if sensing the kindness she carried with her. Rachel had a way of asking questions that made John pause and think. She would inquire about the history of the ranch, about the old barn his grandfather had built, or the river that ran through the property. She asked about his childhood, the first time he had ridden a horse, and what dreams he might have had beyond these fields. John had never been good at talking about himself, but with Rachel, the words came easier. He told her about the long nights he had spent under the stars, watching the moonlight dance across the pasture, feeling both lonely and content. He spoke of his parents, their teachings, and how their values had shaped him. Rachel listened with genuine interest, never interrupting or judging. She shared small stories of her own life too, growing up in the city, her love of books, her fascination with people, and how they connected with one another. She was not trying to impress John, nor was she pretending to be someone she was not. She was simply herself, open and honest, and John found that he admired her for it. Over time, he realized that he looked forward to these conversations as much as he did the work itself. Workdays on the ranch were still long and demanding, but Rachel had a way of turning them into shared experiences rather than chores. They would repair fences together, sometimes sitting side by side on the wooden rails, discussing the patterns of the land, the seasons, and the care of the animals. She learned quickly, asking questions when she was unsure, and listening when John explained the intricacies of ranch life. John found that teaching her gave him a quiet joy he hadn't expected. He felt respected, valued, and even proud to see her adapt to the challenges of the ranch. One crisp morning, as the sun rose over the hills, painting the world in shades of gold and pink, Rachel suggested they take a walk along the creek that ran through the property. John hesitated at first. He was used to working and moving with purpose, not wandering aimlessly. But he agreed, trusting her judgment. As they walked, the frost crunching under their boots and the smell of pine in the air, they talked about small things, favorite childhood memories, simple pleasures, and dreams that seemed distant but still alive. Rachel pointed out tracks in the mud, identified birds, and shared her observations about the land in ways that made John see it differently. That day, John realized something important. Rachel was not just a worker on his ranch. She was teaching him to appreciate the subtle beauty of life he had taken for granted. He had always loved the land, but now he was noticing the small details, the way sunlight reflected on the river, the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze, the patterns the wind left in the tall grass. It was as if her presence had opened his senses, showing him life in sharper, brighter colors. Evenings became a time of quiet companionship. After a long day of work, they would prepare a simple meal together. Sometimes stew, sometimes fresh bread, and eat by the fire in the kitchen. John had grown accustomed to his solitary dinners, but now the room was filled with conversation and laughter. Rachel would ask about his day, share stories from hers, and sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. These moments, though simple, were profound to John. He felt connected in a way he never had before, and the sense of isolation that had once defined his life seemed to lift a little with each passing day. Rachel had a gentle way of pushing John out of his comfort zone, encouraging him to try things he would normally avoid. She suggested small adventures, checking the far fields together, hiking into the nearby woods, or taking a ride on horseback to survey the property. At first, John felt hesitant, unsure if these outings were practical or necessary, but Rachel's enthusiasm was contagious. He found himself agreeing, and slowly, the ranch no longer felt like a boundary that kept him confined. It became a landscape of possibility, a place where new experiences could be shared and memories made. One afternoon, as they worked to repair a broken fence along the northern pasture, John noticed a shift in himself. He was laughing more freely than he had in years, teasing Rachel as she struggled with a particularly stubborn post. She responded with equal jest, and for a moment, they were not teacher and helper, rancher and visitor. They were simply two people enjoying each other's company. John realized that these interactions, these small exchanges, were bringing him a happiness he had never allowed himself to feel. The bond between them grew stronger, as Rachel continued to reveal the depths of her empathy and understanding. She did not judge John for his solitude or his shy nature. Instead, she celebrated his strengths and gently encouraged him to explore his vulnerabilities. She asked about his fears, about the moments when he felt uncertain or inadequate, and listened patiently as he spoke. For the first time, John realized that someone genuinely wanted to understand him. Not because it served a purpose, but simply because they cared. Winter arrived slowly, dusting the ranch with snow and transforming the landscape into a quiet, white world. The days grew shorter, and the work became more challenging. Yet, John found that he no longer dreaded the cold mornings or the long hours. With Rachel beside him, even the hardest tasks felt lighter. They shoveled snow from the barn roofs together, checked on the livestock in freezing temperatures, and shared hot drinks by the fire afterward. The physical challenges of the season became opportunities to work together, laugh together, and deepen their connection. During one particularly snowy evening, as the wind howled outside and the fire roared in the fireplace, Rachel spoke candidly about human connection. She did not speak of romance directly, but of trust, understanding, and the small ways people give of themselves to others. She talked about friendship, loyalty, and emotional support, the kinds of gifts that could transform a person's life without grand gestures or dramatic events. John listened intently, realizing that the feelings he had been experiencing were not just fleeting emotions. They were part of a profound connection that had been growing steadily since her arrival. Over the next few weeks, the bond between them deepened further. They continued to share work, meals, and conversations, but also small moments of quiet intimacy. Sitting together in the sun, observing a herd of cattle, or listening to the distant call of an owl, John began to notice the subtle ways Rachel's presence affected him. He smiled more easily. He laughed without hesitation, and he felt a warmth in his heart that he had not experienced before. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a space filled with companionship and mutual respect. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the hill overlooking the property, Rachel turned to John and said, "You've worked so hard all your life. John, you deserve someone who truly sees you, who appreciates not just what you do, but who you are." John felt a lump in his throat, realizing that her words reflected his own unspoken longing. He had spent years focused on survival, duty, and routine, never allowing himself to hope for deeper connection. Now, he was confronted with the reality that he could not only hope for it, but experience it. From that moment, John began to see Rachel not just as a visitor or helper, but as a presence that brought balance, joy, and understanding into his life. She had not come to the ranch to change him, but simply to be part of his world. And in doing so, she had changed it for him. The days continued with chores, laughter, and quiet reflection. But John carried a new awareness. That life could hold more than routine and solitude. It could hold friendship, understanding, and a deep, human connection that nourished the heart. By the time early winter settled fully over the ranch, John's life had already shifted. He woke with a renewed sense of purpose. His days filled not only with work, but with moments of shared joy. He had begun to understand that connection was not a fleeting pleasure, but a gift that grew steadily, nurtured by attention, care, and understanding. Rachel had not only brought energy and skill to the ranch, she had brought perspective, warmth, and the quiet knowledge that life could be richer than he had ever imagined. As snow blanketed the fields and the stars sparkled above the quiet landscape, John realized something profound. He had spent years in isolation, content with work and routine, but now he understood the value of human connection. He had learned to trust, to share, and to appreciate the presence of another person. Rachel's companionship had opened a door he had never dared to knock on before, and though he did not yet know where this path would lead, he was certain of one thing: life on the ranch would never be the same again. As the winter deepened, the bond between John and Rachel grew stronger, moving beyond shared work into a deeper understanding of each other. Days on the ranch were long and often difficult, but they had begun to find joy in even the smallest moments. A broken fence, a stubborn horse, or a snow-covered field became opportunities for them to work together, laugh together, and strengthen the connection that had slowly formed over weeks. John had always been a man of routine, someone who valued predictability and structure. But Rachel's presence had begun to show him the beauty of spontaneity. She would suggest small adventures that he had never considered, like exploring the woods behind the north pasture, ice skating on the frozen creek, or building a small snow shelter for warmth during a sudden snowstorm. At first, John had been hesitant. These ideas seemed frivolous, impractical, or even risky. But Rachel's enthusiasm was infectious, and he found himself agreeing, curious to see what each day would bring when she was there. One particularly cold morning, they set out to repair the old barn roof. The wind cut through the fields, and the frost made every step cautious. Rachel climbed the ladder with confidence, her laughter echoing as John followed slowly behind. He was careful, measured, and precise, as always, but he noticed the ease with which she moved, the way she approached challenges without fear. Watching her, John felt admiration, but also a quiet longing. It was not romantic in the usual sense, but a desire for trust and closeness that he had never felt with anyone before. As they worked, they talked about their lives' past experiences, hopes, and even regrets. Rachel shared memories of her childhood, of the bustling city streets and crowded classrooms, and of the moments that had shaped her into the person she was. John, in turn, opened up more than he ever had before. He spoke about his parents, their wisdom, and how he had learned the value of hard work and responsibility. He spoke about his fears, fear of failing, of being alone, of never connecting with someone on a deeper level. Rachel listened with patience and understanding, never interrupting or judging, simply being present with him in the quiet honesty of the moment. There were evenings when the ranch was blanketed in snow, the wind howling outside, and the two of them would sit together by the fire in the kitchen. These were the moments John cherished most. They would drink hot cocoa or simple tea, talking about everything from the land to distant places they dreamed of visiting one day. Sometimes they would sit in silence, listening to the crackle of the fire or the distant call of a coyote. These quiet moments were powerful in their own way. John realized that companionship was not always about words. It was about presence, about feeling understood and supported without needing explanations. Rachel encouraged John to see himself differently. He had spent so many years defining himself by his work and his solitude, never considering that he could be more than a rancher. She suggested that he allow himself to explore hobbies he had abandoned, to enjoy moments of leisure, and to appreciate the small joys in life. John began to notice the beauty of a sunrise, the way snow glittered under moonlight, and the simple satisfaction of a warm fire after a long day. These were moments he had seen before but never fully appreciated until Rachel helped him look through a different lens. One afternoon, they went to check the far fields together. The snow was thick, and the wind had shaped it into soft drifts along the fence lines. As they walked, Rachel pointed out animal tracks, patterns in the trees, and the subtle shifts in the landscape that revealed the secrets of the land. John listened, absorbing her observations. Realizing how her presence had sharpened his awareness, he began to notice the colors of winter more vividly, the way the pale sunlight reflected on the snow, and the quiet rhythm of the frozen creek. With Rachel, every small detail of the world seemed richer, more alive. The emotional connection between them deepened as well. Rachel had a gentle way of guiding John to face his vulnerabilities. She asked about the moments when he felt uncertain or alone, encouraging him to speak openly. For the first time, John realized that being vulnerable did not mean being weak. In fact, sharing his thoughts, fears, and memories made him feel stronger, more human, and more connected. He began to trust Rachel completely, knowing that she would not judge him or push him beyond his comfort zone. Instead, she supported him, helping him see his own worth and the potential for joy in life. As winter turned to early spring, John noticed subtle changes in his daily routine. He woke earlier, not just out of habit, but because he was eager to see what the day would bring. Chores no longer felt like monotonous tasks. They were opportunities to share experiences with Rachel, to work together, and to laugh at small mistakes. He began to anticipate her observations, enjoy her company, and even feel excitement at the thought of their shared adventures. The ranch, once a place of isolation, had transformed into a space of learning, connection, and quiet joy. There were also moments of reflection. John often thought about how his life had been before Rachel arrived. He realized that he had spent so much time focused on duty and routine that he had overlooked the small joys and connections that make life meaningful. Her presence reminded him that life was not just about survival or hard work. It was about sharing experiences, understanding others, and embracing moments of happiness wherever they could be found. Rachel, too, had grown during this time. Living on the ranch, working alongside John, and learning the rhythms of rural life had given her a new perspective. She had developed a deep respect for John's dedication, patience, and integrity. She admired the way he cared for the animals, the land, and the traditions passed down through generations. But more than that, she appreciated his honesty, his quiet thoughtfulness, and the way he gradually allowed her into his world. She understood that the bond they were forming was not just about companionship, it was about mutual growth, trust, and the subtle power of human connection. One late afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the distant hills, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange, John and Rachel paused in their work to sit on a wooden fence. The air was cold, but the warmth of their shared presence made it feel comfortable. They talked about dreams, not just practical ones, but those that had seemed distant or impossible. Rachel encouraged John to consider possibilities he had never imagined. Traveling to other states, learning new skills, or even inviting friends to the ranch for small gatherings. John listened, feeling a mixture of excitement and uncertainty, but also a new sense of hope. The ranch, which had once symbolized solitude and routine, had become a place of possibility. John realized that the emotional gifts Rachel had brought into his life were more profound than he could have anticipated. She had given him patience, understanding, trust, and the courage to embrace life fully. He began to understand that happiness was not always found in grand gestures or dramatic events. It was often discovered in small, consistent moments shared with someone who truly cared. As the days grew longer and the snow began to melt, the bond between John and Rachel became unshakable. They worked side by side, laughed together, and supported each other through both the mundane and the challenging aspects of ranch life. John felt a deep sense of gratitude for her presence and a quiet pride in the life they were building together, even in its simplest form. The connection they shared was not flashy or dramatic. It was steady, nurturing, and profoundly real. John began to see a future he had never dared to imagine. He realized that life did not have to be defined solely by routine, solitude, or the demands of work. There was room for companionship, shared joy, and even adventure. Rachel's influence had shown him that opening his heart to another person did not diminish his independence or his dedication to the ranch. Instead, it enhanced his life in ways he had never known possible. By the end of the season, John felt a quiet transformation within himself. He was no longer the solitary rancher who lived only for work and routine. He had discovered a new dimension of life, one filled with laughter, shared experiences, and emotional connection. Rachel had not only become a companion, she had become a teacher, a guide, and a friend who had helped him unlock parts of himself he had long kept hidden. The winter had passed, but its lessons remained. John understood that the bond he shared with Rachel was not a fleeting moment. It was a foundation upon which he could build a richer, more fulfilling life. The ranch, once a symbol of isolation, had become a place of growth, joy, and meaningful connection. And as John looked across the fields, watching Rachel move confidently among the animals, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had learned that true companionship was about trust, understanding, and the courage to open one's heart. In the quiet of the early spring evenings, John often reflected on how far he had come. The emotional walls he had built over decades were slowly coming down, replaced with trust, appreciation, and genuine affection. Rachel had given him more than just her presence. She had given him a new way to see himself and the world around him. And though the future remained uncertain, John knew one thing with certainty. His life had been forever changed by her friendship, guidance, and the quiet power of human connection. As spring gradually warmed the ranch, John felt a sense of renewal he had never known before. The snow had melted, the grass had grown green again, and the first buds of flowers were appearing in the fields. With each passing day, the ranch seemed alive in a way it never had during the long winter months. But the most significant change was not in the land, it was in John himself. He had learned to see life differently, to appreciate companionship, and to embrace the subtle joys that had once seemed out of reach. Rachel had become an inseparable part of his daily existence, and he could hardly imagine the ranch without her presence. Rachel's final weeks at the ranch approached quietly but with purpose. She continued to work alongside John, tending the animals, repairing fences, and sharing meals by the fire. But there was a new energy between them, an unspoken understanding that their time together was precious. John had grown more confident, more open, and more aware of his own capacity for connection. He no longer felt the heavy weight of isolation, and he realized that this transformation had been made possible through Rachel's kindness, patience, and understanding. One afternoon, as they were repairing the old wooden fence along the eastern pasture, Rachel paused and looked at John. Her eyes held a softness that made his heart skip a beat. "John," she said, "you've worked so hard all your life, and you've built this place with your hands, your heart, and your patience. I hope you can see yourself as I see you, a capable, kind, and strong man who deserves happiness and connection." John felt a lump in his throat. Words failed him, but he nodded, knowing that her message had penetrated deeper than anything anyone had ever said to him before. Their days became a careful balance of work and reflection. John began to notice small gestures that Rachel made, how she arranged his workspace to make it more comfortable, how she remembered the smallest details about the animals, and how she celebrated even minor achievements with genuine enthusiasm. He realized that she had taught him more than practical skills. She had shown him how to notice, appreciate, and value the details of life, how to live with intention and joy. As the sun set one evening, they sat together on the porch, sipping warm tea and watching the horizon. The sky was painted with brilliant shades of pink, orange, and purple. The mountains silhouetted against the fading light. Rachel rested her hand lightly on the railing and said, "John, life is more than the work we do or the routines we follow. It's about the people we share it with, the experiences we create, and the trust we build. I hope you carry this with you always." John felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that Rachel's gift was not just her companionship, but the lessons she had imparted, lessons about trust, empathy, and embracing the richness of life. John reflected on the changes he had undergone. He had been a man who lived in quiet isolation, focused solely on the survival and upkeep of the ranch. He had been shy, reserved, and uncertain about human connection. But through his time with Rachel, he had discovered the beauty of shared work, the comfort of honest conversation, and the quiet joy of mutual respect. He understood now that life could hold more than routine and responsibility. It could hold warmth, laughter, and the profound satisfaction of being truly seen and understood. The ranch itself seemed to reflect this transformation. The fields, once merely functional, now invited exploration. The animals responded to their care with renewed energy, and even the old barn seemed to echo the warmth that had entered the property. John realized that the ranch was no longer a symbol of solitude. It was a home, a place of learning, growth, and meaningful connection. Every corner of the property held memories of shared work, quiet conversations, and moments of laughter that had changed his life. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, Rachel suggested a walk to the northern woods, a place they had not visited since the snow melted. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of pine and new growth. Birds chirped, and the first signs of spring flowers dotted the forest floor. As they walked, Rachel spoke of her experiences, of the importance of trusting oneself and others, and of the beauty in small, consistent acts of care and kindness. John listened, absorbing her words, feeling a sense of clarity and purpose he had never known before. It became clear to John that Rachel's gift was not fleeting or superficial. She had given him confidence, perspective, and the courage to embrace life fully. She had taught him that companionship is not only about closeness or intimacy, but about seeing and valuing each other's humanity. She had shown him the importance of patience, empathy, and trust. And through this guidance, John had learned to see himself in a new light, as a man capable of connection, gratitude, and joy. As the days passed, the inevitable moment of farewell approached. Rachel's time on the ranch was ending, and she would return to her own life. John felt a mix of gratitude, sadness, and hope. He knew that her departure did not mean an end to the lessons she had imparted, or the bond they had formed. Instead, he understood that the growth they had shared would continue to influence his life, shaping the way he approached relationships, work, and his own sense of self. On her final evening, they sat together on the porch, the sky painted with the soft colors of dusk. Rachel placed a hand gently on John's shoulder. "I am proud of you, John. not because of the work you've done, but because of the person you are becoming. Remember that life is full of opportunities to connect, to grow, and to share. Keep your heart open, and you will find happiness in ways you never imagined. John nodded, feeling the weight and significance of her words. He realized that her presence had been a turning point in his life, a moment that had shifted him from solitude to connection, from routine to fulfillment. The next morning, Rachel packed her belongings and prepared to leave. John watched her drive down the dirt road, the sun glinting off the vehicle, and felt a quiet sense of loss. Yet he also felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had left him with more than memories. She had given him tools to live a fuller, richer life. He understood now that the lessons she had imparted, the importance of trust, presence, and shared experience, were gifts he could carry forward, shaping every day on the ranch and every interaction with the people and animals around him. In the weeks following Rachel's departure, John continued his routines, but they were now infused with the lessons he had learned. He tended the animals and fields with the same diligence as before, but he also allowed himself moments of reflection, joy, and connection. He noticed the colors of the sunrise, the patterns of the clouds, and the sounds of the wind through the trees. He found satisfaction in small acts of care, both for the land and for himself. And he carried a quiet hope that life could continue to bring meaningful relationships, shared experiences, and emotional growth. John began to engage more with the people in town. He shared stories about the ranch, offered help to neighbors, and even allowed himself to enjoy casual conversation in ways he had previously avoided. He discovered that he was more confident, more open, and more willing to take small social risks. Rachel had not only transformed his personal life, but had also inspired him to connect with the wider world, to share his experiences, and to value human interaction in ways he had never considered. Over time, John also began to reflect on the meaning of his own existence. He realized that the true gift Rachel had given him was not simply companionship, but the ability to see himself as worthy of connection and happiness. He had learned that life's richness comes not from isolation or routine alone, but from the relationships we cultivate, the lessons we share, and the trust we build with those around us. Rachel's presence had shown him a path toward emotional growth, fulfillment, and joy that he could continue to follow long after her departure. As spring fully took hold, the ranch became a symbol not just of work and responsibility, but of renewal, growth, and the potential for meaningful connection. John continued his daily tasks, tending the land and caring for the animals, but he now did so with a heart open to experience, trust, and joy. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that life had much more to offer than solitude and routine. And though Rachel was no longer physically present, her influence remained woven into every aspect of his life: the way he moved through the ranch, the way he noticed the world, and the way he approached relationships. John had been a man who lived quietly, in the rhythm of routine and responsibility. But through Rachel's presence, he had discovered the value of companionship, trust, and emotional connection. He had learned that life could be richer, fuller, and more meaningful when shared with someone who truly saw and understood him. The ranch, once a place of isolation, had become a space of growth, joy, and possibility. And John knew, deep in his heart, that the lessons he had learned would stay with him forever. As the sun set one evening over the lush green fields, John stood at the edge of the pasture, feeling a sense of gratitude and hope. He thought of Rachel, of the moments they had shared, and of the profound ways she had changed his life. And in that quiet, golden light, he understood that he was no longer the solitary rancher he had once been. He was a man capable of connection, trust, and joy, a man who had learned that the true richness of life comes not only from the work we do, but from the relationships we nurture and the hearts we touch.